So we have made it to the 7th point of 7-point mind training. So in the 7th point are the 20 practices. There's 20 practices. And as we've discussed in the past, these practices are really very sage instructions on how to conduct yourself in ways that are going to bring most effective use of the teachings. So for those of you maybe our first time here, 7-point mind training is a Lojong practice of a path to enlightenment, primarily focused on a busy lifetime, how to engage in practice when we're active, its primary utilization is around transforming adversity into the path. And so we really get an opportunity to work with our minds, our interactions with others, and make our daily life our Dharma practice. So the first point is really preliminary practice. These 4 thoughts that turn our mind to Dharma, that really ripen us to be ready to engage in the main practice, which is cultivating the mind of awakening, the 2 bodhicittas. So that's really the main practice. I mean, that's liberation. And so there's pith instructions on that. And then the third point here is, how do we transform these difficult situations into a path? And so there's very specific ways that we do that. Then the 4th one is the synthesis of practice for a single lifetime. Then we have the measurement, so we know that we're on track or not. If we're doing all this and we're not getting much of an effect, either we're doing something wrong or it's not working. So it's really important to have a measurement of what's going on. And then we have the precepts, which is the 6th point, and then we're on the practices. So we've covered a few of them, and we just briefly touched, I think, one really key point. I'm going to have us elaborate on that tonight, which is acquiring the 3 principal causes. 3 principal causes. Number 1 of which is a qualified teacher. And that is often a journey. In our traditions, it said that if you spend 10 years checking out a teacher, you've not wasted 10 years. It's a worthy endeavor to really seek out and find qualified teachers that can guide you on a path that's going to lead us to liberation. So there's some qualities to look for in this way. And so number 1 is really, hey, let's find a qualified teacher. Let's find someone who has a lineage, someone who's had training, someone who has some insight, and someone that, one of the quick, easy tells is, have they subdued their own mentally afflicted states? It's kind of a good starting point. If we've got a teacher that you notice gets harsh or angry a lot, if you have a teacher that is unskillful in how they interact with others, maybe inappropriately, if you have teachers that you can see their mind get greedy, and you just start to notice these mental afflicted states that arise. And that's something to look at. It doesn't necessarily make them a bad teacher or anything. It just means, well, you see where they're at in terms of how far they can guide you within these points of qualities of a teacher. One is that they hopefully have developed something a little further along than I have, right? So if I'm looking for a teacher, I want them to have dealt with some issues to show me where I'm going. So in here, he makes this real key point, and so I want to elaborate a bit on it. So the first of these 3 principal causes, it's very important for Dharma practitioners, not the least of those who are teachers, to be endowed with sound learning. So we talked a bit about this last week, but the idea is that some people will focus primarily on a practice. I'm a meditator, and they won't take some time to really study the path and really know what are the levels and stages and how this fits into a path. And then there's, on the other extreme, he points out there's those that only study and they don't spend a whole lot of time in meditation or really getting to know the mind. And so he makes this really important point that learning by itself is barren. It's also terribly hard. And likewise, if we're just meditating without the knowledge, it's going to be very difficult to get anywhere. You know, that's often one of the references these old lamas will say. It's like marmot meditation. That I'm meditating a lot, but I'm not sure where it's going, and I'm not sure where it fits into this journey of addressing mental afflictions. So he just wants to make this point before we get too far in. And he's making a point, if we're too caught up in learning, we can become arrogant, and this becomes spiritual pride. It's a very big pitfall. And then if there's only focus on the practice, as if the philosophy and theory were just for scholars, and the real essence lay in a certain technique, he puts it rather bluntly here. One can be a stupid yogi, no less than a barren scholar. So, you know, with all things, let's make sure that I receive directions, I have understanding, and I apply them. So I practice, and as I practice, I keep checking with the path and with the understanding, with the knowledge of received teachings. And so that's why, you know, I have friends that have been in retreat probably now most of, see, I was maybe 14 years now, probably more. It was 9, yeah, it was probably 9 about 7 years ago, but, you know, they live in retreat pretty much, you know, full time, and they'll come out of retreat for teachings by His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama. That's their primary teacher. Then they'll come out and they'll keep getting teachings. They'll come out and they'll take clear notes. They'll go back in their retreat and they'll review text. So they're really keeping current. And now they're out of retreat and they come out and teach. So he's making this point that whether we're a student, whether we're a teacher, you know, this is a continual process, and it's a balanced process. So one of the real difficult things that he wants to bring up here is that if we don't have a proper teacher, what can happen is we can really make a lot of mistakes along the way. We can waste a lot of time. We can think we've achieved something when maybe we haven't. Said one of the most prevalent pitfalls is a misjudgment concerning insight. Someone who meditates or watches the sunset or even takes psychedelic drugs assumes they have realized emptiness or dharmakaya. You know, so people sometimes will be good meditators, and they'll reach a state of, you know, non-dual sense of self and reality. This non-dualism goes away, and the, you know, basically maybe even the level of mind, and it's blissful, it's luminous, it's non-conceptual. And then very often people will say, well, I'm enlightened. I taste it as enlightenment. I recognize I'm not this. And then they come out of their meditation, and then they're still subject to anger, frustration, resentment. Like, okay, in meditation, I've dissolved my sense consciousness, and I'm meditating. Now I'm non-dual. I'm enlightened. Come out of meditating. I'm a body. I'm cold. I'm frustrated. I'm angry. And all these mental afflictions are here. So there's no irreversible thing that happens. It's as one of my teachers likes to say, it's a timeout in a game you're already losing, right? So you're not losing any more when you're in that state. It's an ethically neutral state. But when you come out, you really haven't, all those afflictions are still there. They haven't been rooted. So there hasn't been any severing that can take place. So a lot of people, though, then they do that. So he has this great story. It was a Westerner when he was in Dharamsala and training with Geshe Rabten. A Westerner showed up and informed the Geshe that he had attained enlightenment. And this knows the extremely subtle body of the Buddha. And he asked what he should do next to the Geshe. He commented that he was perturbed by the awareness that he had very little compassion. So he was enlightened, but upset that he's not very compassionate. And so he's asking the Geshe what he should do next. Geshe Rabten felt there was nothing he could do for someone so fixed on that notion of their realization. So he responded, well, why don't you go out the front door and turn right? Basically he's just saying there's nothing I can offer, And so this is where this idea of having teachers that have achieved some realization and clarity on the path. They can guide you when we go astray and help us with some of those misperceptions. We can save a lot of time and unnecessary suffering by seeking out the first of these principal causes, a qualified spiritual mentor. But no guru is a substitute for our own intuitive wisdom. Each of us is endowed with the innate potential for insight that is our Buddha nature. And the external teacher is there to unveil this intuitive wisdom. Keep in mind also that many people who claim... Okay, I'll pause with that. And so that's a point that he's making. Sometimes when we find a teacher or something, we will disregard some common sense and maybe do some things that are not that appropriate and not that healthy. So we really want qualified teachers, ethical, and we don't want to throw away our common sense and guidance in the process. And so that's why it's good to take your time and have a teacher that you can rely on, check out. Kick the tires, check under the hood. You'll go a lot further. I've been very fortunate. It's interesting, as I read all this, as I've taught this as one of my really fundamental preachings, is to make sure that we're in good conditions with qualified people. When I met my teacher, Geshe Gelsen, I didn't do any of that. It's like, whoa, this is the guy, and he's this incredible monk, and old Geshe and old Tibetan Lama, he's the one on this side, the left, you're right, and I heard all these stories about him, half of which were not true, by the way. I found that out later. People spread rumors about, he's this and he's done that, and but I kept going, and what I did find was that over the years that I studied with him, and he became my root guru, I found I was very, very fortunate. Beyond words, that for whatever reason I got to be in that room at that time, and that he turned out to be one of these great masters, and all that proof was in the pudding over the years that I got to train with him. But I didn't do the pre-checking that we're encouraging others to do. But I have seen where others don't check so thoroughly, and sometimes make some mistakes. And so the distinction here, though, is that it's perfectly okay to go to teachings, check out Dharma centers, check out teachers, and see, what they have to offer, what's your path, make sure these things are good. And you're only going to be able to find a qualified teacher by doing that. So, you check things out. So there's a difference between, like right now, we're just having a teaching, and I'm a spiritual friend. Where they're laying down in this context is that you're going to find someone, hopefully at some point, who's going to be that root guru, and that's a very special connection of someone who can see your mind and who can guide you. And for the record, that's not me. So, but there are these wonderful beings that have these qualities, and so they're saying, in this point here is really make a point to put that on your priority agenda, is to have conditions ripen to where you can be with such a person. And they're out there. His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama, if you can't find anything else, I'd just say just rest with him. He's solid. You can have a lot of faith there. And but teachings like this, just again to make sure that whoever's teaching is someone who has at least subdued some of their mental afflictions and is ethical, has had some training, and can share from some insight. So those are key points. So otherwise, we can spend a lot of time going in circles and a lot of time chasing things that maybe don't have a full path. So simply be very cautious, and we can derive far more benefit by patiently seeking out someone who has true depth and substance. So that's his key point there, is to make that happen. The second principal cause is devoting ourselves to realization, applying ourselves to gaining realization of such truths expressed in Buddhism as this path offers. He's talking about the preciousness of this life, the opportunity that we have all the way up to enlightenment, that we really want to dedicate that. And that becomes really the entry point when we think about, some people say, well, I'm a Buddhist. Some people say, I don't know if I'm a Buddhist. Some people will practice a long time. And that's a label in Buddhist. But the path of Buddhism, the entry to the path, is this renunciation. This renunciation that arises. It says, this worldly stuff that I'm engaged in, that's not what I'm all about. It will come and it will go. It's, as we say in the text, like winnowed chaff. It will come and go. All the pleasurable experiences we've had in our time, all the cool vacations, they've come and they've gone. All the challenges that have come, they've gone. We talked earlier, all those stresses that we stress about. How many things have we stressed about in our life? Man, we can't even add up how many times I've been stressed. And we forget, when I'm stressed now, guess what? That'll go too, right? But it seems so real at the time. And it's real because I'm really bought into, if this happens, I'm going to be really happy. And if this happens, I'm going to be really miserable. And then fundamentally, how true is that? Because we've had 1 million happy things happen, and I can be miserable today. I've had 1 million terrible things happen, and I can be joyful today. They're so ephemeral. They come and they go. But out of misperception, we just keep latching on. But this next thing, if this next thing happens, I'm going to have it made. It's just going to be so good. And then an accident happens, or a job. It's just samsara. So the condition, the delusional condition, cyclic existence of samsara, it's present. So I can choose to devote my life to samsara, or I can say, well, you know what? I'm going to renounce that delusional, crazy thinking, and I'm going to root myself into a path of awakening to be liberated from such sufferings. And so that really becomes this entry point. When that shifts, then than this path of awakening. And one might say they'd be on a Buddhist path, which is a path of no more suffering. But we need to devote ourselves to it. It means that when I wake up in the morning, it's pretty easy to get caught right up into samsara. Right? I mean, I have a lot of people say, man, I'm just too busy. I'm just too busy to do, meditation, and at nighttime to take a little time to do it. I'm tired, I got stuff to do. And it's an interesting pronouncement, because what we're saying is, I am way too busy creating stress, worry, and fear in my life to make some time to eliminate it. Okay. I am way too busy decorating samsara to take any time to get out of it. I am spending all my time and energy trying to make samsara comfortable, which is impossible, to make the time to eliminate that suffering. But if we were to take some time in the morning before my mind jumps to, I wake up, hey, where's the coffee? Where's the toast? What's going, that mind, samsara's here. What are we going to do today? Oh, I have to deal with so-and-so. And, just all that stuff, to pause and to engage in the preliminary practices, these 4 thoughts that turn our mind and Dharma, just remind us that you're about to embark upon a day that will never come again in your life. And that you have a rare and precious human rebirth and all the potentials for enlightenment right now. And you're about to embark upon a day that will never come again, and that every interaction you have is an opportunity to cultivate the path, to cultivate merit, to cultivate wisdom, to make your life meaningful. Or it's the opportunity to water the seeds of attachment and aversion and struggles and stress and worries and fears. What do I want to do? Most of the time we don't sit there and have that clear choice, because that's not even on my mind. I'm just looking for the coffee and hoping the toast isn't burnt before I rush out the door, right? I'm not thinking all that stuff. And let alone, I'm worried about what's going to happen next week, not knowing that I don't know that I'll have tomorrow. I'm not thinking that way, right? So taking that time in the morning before all that busyness to remember, I don't know how many days I have. No one does. But I do know this day will never come again. And right now I have this potential. It's this very precious gift that's awaiting me, filled with potential. The seeds of enlightenment are right here, right now. And can I hold that as I engage in my day? That's what he's talking about here, to really devote ourselves to this realization, to engage in our life like that. Then our priority shift. Instead of getting busy, we treasure the moments that are in front of us, the time that we have with the people in our lives, and the opportunities to grow the seeds of patience and compassion and clarity. And the third principal cause is around creating favorable circumstances for our practice. And favorable circumstances for Dharma practice are both internal and external. So internal ones, what am I doing to create a favorable mental state for my practice? Am I taking the time in the morning? Am I taking a little time in the evening? Am I developing? I think one of the most powerful tools, which is, I believe, to be a skill and an action to be cultivated, is patience. So Venerable Semke was here. The nuns use the word fortitude. They're much more fierce than I am. They're strong. And so patience needs fortitude, because when you have patience, you're able to withstand uncomfortable situations. When you have patience, you're able to withstand, impulses and tendencies. You're able to, withstand, some difficult things that arise, knowing that they won't last. Fortitude. There's a fortitude there. So internally, to create favorable circumstances. Now, if I want a mind that is peaceful and calm, enlightened, it's clear, chasing around distraction and greed and attachment and diversion is not going to be a favorable circumstance. Patience would be. Patience. And that's something, he's making a point here that he's talking about intelligence and patience, and these qualities of mind are malleable. They're malleable. They can grow. We can know more. We can increase our intelligence. We can increase our patience. We can increase our attention. And that's really the key that unlocks the door to all of this, is the ability to rest my attention where I choose to, rather than have it just bouncing around, dragging me from one worry, thought, and fear to the next. We can change that. We can change that. But we have to work on it. It doesn't happen on its own. So, the internal conditions that support Dharma. Well, one is, that's why a lot of times you'll see us meditating. I can cultivate some attention. Patience, that I can notice that these things come and go. Intelligence, that I can really bring to mind a critical mind that understands the importance of challenging and questioning things, including my own labels, including teachings that come. Let's question these. Do they add up? Do they work? Questioning my habitual way of living. Is that really going to get me anywhere? Or are there some healthier habits that are going to support change? And then the external conditions of pretty common. We need shelter. We need some health care. We need food. It's potluck night, so we got food. So we're good today. And so the idea is that we have external conditions that support Dharma practice, internal conditions. So again, these three then are to really acquire a qualified teacher, to devote yourself really to the realization, to the path, and then to create conditions that support Dharma practice. And then he makes a point in here that if you have all three, I think the technical term was woo-hoo. All right, I mean, we got it. All right, I mean, rejoice. I got this. This is awesome, because not many do. Not many do. Right? And I mean, sometimes I'll go to a place out in Ohio. I mean, we're pretty remote here, but I go to Ohio. Some people will drive 3 hours, for an hour and a half talk, because there's nothing there. So, and there's other places where there's nothing, there. Today, you could do YouTube, and His Holiness the Dalai Lama is right there. So if you're ever looking for a qualified teacher and you feel like you can't find it, go to YouTube. Type in His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama. You'll have a qualified teacher right there. And, what access. And if you don't have these conditions that ripen, then earlier in these teachings, they talked about creating the conditions for them to happen. So I gave a teaching on that, and at times that how do we create those conditions? Because sometimes we can be around and think, when would I ever find someone who could lead me all the way to life? How could that be? I was just a knucklehead wandering into a Buddhist temple and had no idea what the heck this thing was about, and felt awkward. They're doing all these prostrations, doing things I didn't know, and how do we create these circumstances? How does that happen? And I started by cleaning the bathrooms. and trying to be of service. Until some friend of mine started cleaning the bathrooms, doing a much better job than me. So I got booted out of that. And I became the water boy. So then I became the water boy at the temple. And back then I have to go to a store and fill up these big jugs, and bring it back. And being of service in a sense. And then who would know that someone who didn't have a teacher, didn't understand teachings, didn't have these conditions. I had the physical, and the temple was closed. Would wind up one day becoming a Buddhist monk, who would one day wind up sitting with great yogis who have spent 20 years in a cave, and to have these things like that wasn't even in my thought process. So wherever we're at today, we can't think that that's not going to happen. I once wrote a big check to get as good a seat as I could to see His Holiness the Dalai Lama. I got 4th row seats. I thought, when would I see His Holiness again? 2 years later, I'm a Buddhist monk, and I am one of the coordinators greeting His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama, hosting him in that very same venue that I was seated out there as just a layperson. 2 years later, a monk greeting him and helping host that. I share that because when I was in that chair, that other thought wasn't rational by any means. So conditions change. Conditions change. They change with us watering the potentials for them to change. To have good teachers, we need to become good students. We need to engage in a practice and create the potentials for that, and create what we call the merit, the spiritual energy, the merit for these things to happen. But they can happen. They can happen. So those 3 are things that we accumulate. And there are, how are we doing for time? Yeah. Any questions on that? Before we go to the 3, cultivate the absence. That's an interesting phrase. Cultivate the absence of 3 degenerations. And you're going to see these tie right into what we just talked about. Have you ever been really inspired to practice only to have that practice fade out? Yeah. We can be pretty fired up, A lot of people, leave retreats and they're, I got it now. Yeah. A month later. Need another retreat, man. Yeah. So, our practice, can degenerate. Our practice, we get, these. As a matter of fact, so here, we'll host the monks. They'll come through. The monks will come through. Place will be jam packed, and everybody's up there for a blessing. We're fired up. All gonna be good. Taking empowerment. And place will be full for a week or so, and then things dwindle. And so, how do we work with that? How do we stay inspired? How do we keep watering these seeds? So here it says, cultivate the absence of the 3 degenerations. And the first is really to have a deep faith in the spiritual mentors. The commentator here, Setchbua, writes that all virtue in this path really depends upon this sense of reverence, that we can have a deep and abiding faith in our teachers. And so does that mean, so within Buddhist Vajrayana, the Tibetan Vajrayana realm, the foundation of all good qualities is the spiritual mentor, is the root guru, right? That's the teacher. And so as you enter a Vajrayana path, one of the ripenings of the mind is as you take initiation and enter into the mandala of a root guru, of a teacher, you fundamentally learn to see them as an enlightened being, as the Buddha. And they say that's one of the most difficult things to do with the mind, is to see that, because you may see their frailty, you may see other things. So it's a hard thing to do. And some people do that in a very blind way, and there's quite a bit of, there's a couple teachers out there right now that have not done such a good job of staying ethical, and their students are suffering because they were taught that they had these vows and to see him as the Buddha, so you do what they say. And then what happens when they misbehave? What happens when they act out? Well, that's a problem. So that's why, number one, let's start with checking them out to begin with. Let's engage in a practice. But at no point in this relationship, for those that go into that path, do we take away our own personal responsibility of intuitive and common sense knowledge. To say, yeah, okay, maybe these teachings got me to this point and they're acting in a way that's inappropriate. No, the answer is no. I'm going to go somewhere else. And so there's in the West, there's been, it's happened, it's not just the West, but inappropriate sexual relationships, inappropriate power relationships, inappropriate things that have happened because of a blind devotion that is not based on some good common sense. You're not going to get very far if you can't rely upon your teacher and know that you can have faith that they've eliminated mental afflictions and can guide you. And so that's really critical, to check them out, to watch what they're like when they're not sitting here. To watch what they're like when they're out in the world, to watch what they're like as they interact with others, to see how they are when nobody's looking. That's always a good thing. Check it out. And then for me, where I find a valuable resource here is that not necessarily being able to see the teacher yet, and that, again, that's a Vajrayana. We're not, right now this is just Buddhism, just Buddhism. It's the path to enlightenment, so no just Buddhism. But it's not the Vajrayana. Right here we have good, fundamental, solid Buddhist teaching, working with the mind and going to enlightenment with bodhicitta. No Vajrayana path. It's couched in there, but no tantric piece here. But when I listen to a teacher who's giving a teaching, when they're giving the Dharma, I see that as the Buddha expressing the teachings of Dharma through this being. So, yeah, maybe they're not perfect, but some of this Dharma is coming out that are the seeds to enlightenment. And, even if he doesn't have an understanding of it, the words are coming out. And let me check the Dharma. Now, if that Dharma comes out and it's coming from the Buddha, it's a source. And that's something I can rely on. So in that sense, the Buddha is always present, even though the person may not be very qualified. But the teachings can come. If they're giving accurate teachings, too. You've got to check that out. But when we find a qualified teacher that we feel good about, then I would recommend taking that moment to recognize and dissolving just their physical body and understand that the Dharma that's coming out is something that is the path to awakening. In that sense, the Buddha is here. And if it's reliable, how are we going to know if it's reliable? You have to test it. You have to put it in action. And one of the great stories is when the Buddha was traveling back in India, you'd come to a town. There's a lot of wandering teachers, and he came upon this one town, and some of the elders of the town came out to meet him before he came in for teachings. And they stopped him and they said, hey, there's a lot of teachers that come through here. And a lot of teachers expound that they have the way and that this is the right way, not that other way. And so he said, how do we know that your way is the right way? And he said, you don't. That is not for me to tell you it's right. It's for you to check and see if it's right. I can offer teachings, but you're the one who has to check. Is this the way or not? Don't take my word for it. Don't take anybody's word for it. Test it. And so that's really the journey here. This is where we make progress. Because if we take some time to do good foundational work of testing these teachings, of seeing, does this really attenuate the mental afflictions that arise in my life? Do these teachings actually lead to reduced suffering and a path to awakening? Is that happening? Is that possible? Is that accurate? Is it functional? Is it practical? Can I put it into use? Well, if we take time to do the check, well, then we can lean into it when I don't want to. We can lean into it when something's uncomfortable or something said I don't really like to hear, because I've tested it and I know that, that's my mental afflictions arising. Here's a path. And if I see others that have walked it ahead of me, well, there's a great deal of faith then. So one of the important ways of maintaining this so it doesn't degenerate is really doing that good foundational work to begin with on our own path of checking and testing, because that's how we're going to develop this first ability of not degenerating, is to have faith in the teacher and the teachings. And not a blind faith. There's nothing in here that is talking about blind faith at all. Blind faith does not get you very far. And when you're sinking in a pool, blind faith is not going to save you. Perseverance, effort, fortitude, and this comes, and it's gonna be sustainable if it's a faith that is based on personal experience of logical, rational, analytical understanding of practice. Then we can lean into it. So first point is always to make sure that happens. If we've done that, then we can go far. So the second element is really maintaining an enthusiasm, not allowing our enthusiasm to wane. And if our I like the way he puts this, because I think we might relate to this. If our practice simply becomes a grind that we must perform out of a sense of responsibility, it is not likely to last long or produce much good fruit. And that happens. And I'll tell you what, in my own life, it's like, oh my gosh, I gotta do my practice. It happens. But I do it anyway. Not good, not well, but I do it anyway. And what helps to do it anyway is that even though I have mental afflictions arising that are blocking me from wanting to do it, there's enough enthusiasm about the importance of the willingness to do it anyway. That's where the magic is. Magic isn't in doing it right, isn't in doing it properly. The magic is I'm doing it even when I didn't want to. That is me not giving into my mind. That's saying, hey John, come on man, there's a jacuzzi out there. You're tired, you deserve this. And really, the enthusiasm will say, you know what I really deserve? To not decorate samsara. What I really deserve is to not miss the opportunity to cultivate a connection of the mind of awakening. What I really deserve is to eliminate suffering in my life. What I really deserve is not to be a prisoner of every thought, impulse, and whim that comes through my mind. That is what I really deserve. And so even though it sucks, you do it anyway. And it's a funny thing, because then when I'm doing it, you know what usually happens? feels pretty good. It's just getting it started, right? It's just getting it started. And then, so the third one is, it's a conscience, right? So it's this third element to allow things to not do. It's really this level of conscience, and in this context, it's around an alertness. Sort of a mindfulness. It is a mindfulness, really. A conscience that's aware of, what am I doing when nobody's around? Is that really watering the seeds of Dharma? Is this contributing to more attachment and greed? Or is this what I'm doing helping me on a path to making my life meaningful when nobody's around? There's awareness that's watching. And it also is alert to how I interact with others. Am I doing or saying things that kind of fundamentally violate my ethical values for a joke? To get in with somebody, to have somebody look at me a certain way. What's going on there? So it is this mindfulness, this conscience around my practice, that I hold it in my mind and I'm conscious of the things that are counterproductive. And in that way it doesn't degenerate, because what happens is we slide a little bit, and we're going to find that our old habits are just right there. How many times we say, well, I'm just not going to meditate today. And then 3 months later, man, I can't get back into a meditation practice. That happens. But it happens in more subtle levels, good intentions that we've had, that we're going to start something, and then it fades away. So having that level of really knowing how important these things are. So we did 3 and 3. So 3 to cultivate, and 3 to cultivate sort of. Meaning cultivate the absence of, so it doesn't degenerate. So the enthusiasm, the faith in the spiritual teacher, the enthusiasm and that conscience. And I think, that's a good piece for here. So these practices, you can see that, and this text is really specifically dedicated towards being very practical in using our interactions with self and others in ways that are conducive for a path. And so he just went back to ground zero in this practice of those. Maybe I don't have that right teacher yet, but I can cultivate the internal circumstances, right? I can make Dharma a priority. I can do that. You could, volunteer at things. My big hero story is one of my best friends who came to the Dharma Center is just a teacher who went to that Dalai Lama teaching with me years ago, who now today is retired in full-time practice. I'm talking about full-time meditation and practice, and has actually received direct teachings in the hotel room by His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama. Has received direct instruction from these great lamas of all these traditions, and she's just a retired school teacher, and has now it's got to be about 14 years of real serious practice. And so these things change. One day you could be sitting there, and then who knows where you'll be next. But it comes with practice, and it comes with creating the inner and outer circumstances. When I traveled as a monk, a lot of people would ask, well, how do we get a teacher? Everybody wants a teacher. And fundamentally, my answer tended to be become a good student. That's how you find a teacher. Become a good student. Create those inner and outer conditions. And a clear, discerning mind. But it'll arise. We dedicate the merit and the wisdom that we've accumulated both individually and collectively today and throughout our lives for the benefit of all sentient beings. May all sentient beings be free of suffering and find lasting happiness. May we be able to use the merit and wisdom accumulated here today and throughout our lives to purify our own minds, to develop and cultivate the seeds of the mind of awakening to become fully liberated so we can be of highest benefit to all sentient beings. All right, thank you all so much.
Thank you, John.
Yes. All right. And thank you online.